objective of the game is to deal 7 points of damage to your opponent. The cards that are forward type are the ones that can deal damage by attacking, but you can only attack with a forward if it's on the field, meaning that it's visible on the table rather than being concealed in your hand of cards. During the game, you'll play your characters onto the field, and to do so you need to pay their cost using a currency that's called crystal points or CP. To generate CP, you can discard cards or you can use cards on the field that are backup type. Players take it in turns and follow a sequence of phases on each turn that includes an attack phase where you can attack with your forwards to try to deal damage. You can only play characters onto the field or attack with your forwards on your own turn. On your opponent's turn, you can use your forwards on the field to block attacks if you want to and avoid taking points of damage that will put you closer to losing. On any turn, yours or your opponent's, you can use certain abilities of any characters on your field or play cards that are summon type to try to disrupt your opponent's plays or counterplays. In this video, we'll look at the main mechanics and rules that you need to know split into the following chapters: how to read the cards, card types, how to play a card, abilities, field zones, stacking of effects, phases of the turn, the attack phase, phase changes, other mechanics, and summary. The description in this video includes a link to another video where we look at an example game for the first few turns to see all of the mechanics and rules in action. So without further ado, let's get started. One game usually lasts between 20 and 30 minutes. Each player uses a main deck of 50 cards plus a limit break deck of 8 cards. There's thousands of cards to choose from and you can browse them at this website here. Your deck can include any card you like and you can have up to 3 copies of any one card. There is a small list of what's known as ban or restricted cards. You can buy ready to play starter decks to learn the game, or you can check out other people's decks from these two websites here. Every few months a new opus or set of cards is released and there's usually around 150 new cards. You can buy individual packs of cards or booster boxes containing multiple packs. Put your cards into plastic sleeves to protect them and make it easier to shuffle while playing the game. Also, use a playmat to put your cards on top of. It makes it easier to pick them up and move them around during the game. All cards have the same layout of information. Let's look at an example card to see how this works. The number in the top left of the card indicates how many crystal points or CP are required to play the card. The colour of the crystal also indicates the element of the card. You can also see this in the background of the text box. The elements are fire, ice, wind, earth, lightning, water are the main elements, and light and dark. You cannot have more than one card with the same name on your field unless those characters have the multi-card symbol next to their name. There are 4 types of card which we'll look at in more depth in a moment: forwards, backups, monsters, and summons. The job is sometimes relevant to the abilities of the card or of other cards that you might include in your deck. Similarly, the category tells you which Final Fantasy game this character or summon appeared in and is sometimes relevant to the abilities of the card or other cards. The text describes the abilities and effects of the card. There are lots of examples of different abilities, but they fall into 4 groups which we'll look at shortly: auto abilities, action abilities, field abilities, and special abilities. The first part of the serial number refers to the opus or set that the card belongs to. A new opus is usually released every 3 or 4 months. The last letter refers to the rarity of the card, i.e. how likely you are to find it in a random booster pack. Starting with the least rare, the rarity ranges as follows: common, rare, hero, legend. There's also an S-rated card exclusive to starter decks. Lastly, we have the power. It's present on all forwards and on some monsters. It indicates the strength of the character, meaning how much damage it inflicts in battle and how much damage it can receive before breaking and being put into the break zone. Damage received by a character does not affect the amount of damage it can inflict. For example, if a 9000 power forward takes 4000 damage, it will still be able to deal 9000 in the next battle. There are 4 different card types. Forwards can attack on your turn to try to deal damage to your opponent, or can block on your opponent's turn to stop you taking damage. Backups can generate crystal points to help you pay the cost of playing other cards in future. Monsters usually trigger an effect when you play them. Some just remain on the field and do nothing else, and others have inbuilt abilities that you can use at a later time. These 3 card types are what's known as characters. Lastly, we have summons. They don't stay on the field, they cause an effect to happen and then go to the break zone. For example, inflicting damage to your opponent's forwards or protecting your own forwards. The card type is shown here, and the name bar of each card type has a unique design. You can only play 1 card at a time. First, you need to generate the required CP amount. You can dull or tap a backup on the field to generate 1 CP of that element, or you could discard a card other than light or dark to the break zone to generate 2 CP of the same element. At least 1 CP needs to match the element of the card you wish to play. Some cards have more than 1 element, and for those you need at least 1 CP of each different element. If needed, you can generate up to 1 CP more than the required cost. For example, you could pay for a card that costs 1 CP by discarding another card to generate 2 CP. Once you've generated the CP, you then spend it by playing the card onto the field. Backups enter dull, i.e. landscape, and forwards and monsters enter active, i.e. portrait. Summons are shown on the field so that they can be read by both players and then immediately put to the break zone. You cannot carry over any unused CP to pay for the next card or an ability. That CP is lost. There are 4 groups of abilities. Auto abilities are where the effects are resolved automatically when their conditions are fulfilled. Some examples include when the card enters the field, when the card is put into the break zone from the field, when the card is chosen by an ability, and at the end of the turn. Action abilities require a cost to be paid before the effect can be resolved. The cost will be stated, followed by a colon. This symbol means to dull the card. Forwards and backups must wait a turn before the dull action can be paid, unless they have the haste ability. CP costs are shown with symbols for each element, like so. A number in a white circle means to pay CP of any element. Field abilities are always active as long as the character is on the field. As soon as the character leaves the field, for example by being put into the break zone, by being removed from the game, or by being returned to your hand, then the effect stops. Lastly, special abilities are unique and powerful abilities with the name written in orange on the card. An S symbol means you must discard a card of the same name, but it could have a different serial number as part of the cost to activate that ability. Now let's look at where and how you put your cards on the table while playing the game. Place your playmat onto the table. Your deck goes in the corner. Underneath you'll need space for your break zone. This is where you'll discard cards, move characters when they are broken, and move summons after being cast. In the middle of the table is the field. This is where you'll play your characters. In the top half will be your forwards and monsters, and the backups will go in the bottom half. Backups enter the field dull, and you can have a maximum of 5 on the field. Your forwards go above, like so. You then need a space for your damage zone, and when you take a point of damage, you'll put the top card of your deck into the damage zone, like this. If you reach 7 points of damage, then you lose the game. You'll have a hand of cards, and if at the end of your turn you have more than 5, then you'll need to discard down to only 5. Whenever a player triggers an ability or casts a summon, the effect is not resolved immediately, but instead goes into what's known as a stack. Both players can then use other abilities or summons to interrupt the effect by adding another on top of this stack. Once players have finished playing their effects, they start to resolve in reverse order of play, i.e. from the top of the stack downwards. Both players can still interrupt the stack again by using other abilities or casting other summons after part of it has already resolved. Let's look at an example using this card, Selfie. A lot of abilities and summons are written in a certain structure or syntax that begins with a sentence instructing the player to choose a target and follows with a sentence or two describing what happens afterwards. The first part of the text on Selfie is an auto ability requiring the player to choose a target, and then once this is chosen, the player can add it to their hand. We'll look at what the words EX burst mean in a moment, so for now just ignore it as it doesn't affect the example. The highlighted text is an example of triggering an ability that creates a stack. Let's look at this in a game situation. If player A plays Selfie onto the field, the auto ability is triggered and they would choose a target fire forward in their break zone. Both players then have the opportunity to add other effects from abilities of characters that are already on the field or from summons in their hand to go on top of the stack. For example, player B might choose to cast the Mist Dragon summon. It has 3 actions that they can choose from, and they could choose the last of these, which is remove all the cards in your opponent's break zone, draw 1 card. If neither player has any further effects to add to the stack, then it would resolve in reverse order. Mist Dragon would resolve first, with the break zone of player A being removed and player B drawing a card, like this. Then Selfie would attempt to resolve, but the chosen fire forward is no longer available because the entire break zone has been removed. Therefore, there's nothing to add to player A's hand. Some effects are resolved immediately and therefore do not create a stack and cannot be interrupted. Field abilities do not have any targets or triggers and therefore don't create a stack. For example, this card, Leftia, has a field ability that boosts the damage dealt by your fire summons and characters. The act of playing a card onto the field does not create a stack. However, if the character has an auto ability that is worded, when this card enters the field, then the auto ability would create a stack, as in the previous example with Selfie. Each of your turns has the following phases. Firstly, you will activate all your cards that are dull, i.e. turn them from landscape to portrait. However, if any of your dull characters have been frozen in your opponent's turn, they will not activate. Instead, they will just become unfrozen and then you'll be able to activate them on the next turn. Next, you'll draw 2 cards, but on the very first turn of the game, whoever is going first will only draw 1 card. If you're unable to draw because your deck is empty, then you lose the game. After that is your main phase 1. This is where you can play characters to the field. Backups will enter dull and forwards and monsters will enter active. Your opponent cannot play characters onto the field during your turn. If a card's ability includes the dull symbol, then it can't be used until your next turn, unless the card is a monster or the card has haste. After the main phase 1 is the attack phase. You can attack with any forwards that are able to if you want to, and we'll look at how this works in a moment. After the attack phase is main phase 2. It's the same as main phase 1. Sometimes it might be better to play characters in main phase 2 rather than main phase 1. For example, to avoid the potential of an EX burst that could break one of your characters that you played. Other times, it might be better to play characters in main phase 1 instead. For example, if a forward has the haste ability, then it would be able to attack on the same turn it was played, and therefore you would want to play it in main phase 1 in order to do that, because otherwise main phase 2 would have happened after the attack phase. You then move to the end phase. This is where any effects marked until the end of the turn are ended. You clear all the damage that is dealt to any forwards that are still on the field, and if you have more than 5 cards in your hand, you'll need to discard until you only had 5 left. You'll then end your turn and your opponent will begin their turn following the same phases. The attack phase follows a sequence of steps that repeat for each potential attack by a forward. Firstly, there's the preparation step. Before declaring the next attack, both players can choose to use abilities or summons, starting with the attacking player and then the defending player. Then we move to declaring an attack. The attacking player selects an active forward and dulls it to indicate it is attacking, like this. Some other points to remember are that if the forward has or has gained the Brave ability, then it doesn't need to be dulled, and forwards that are already dull cannot attack. Forwards can only attack once per turn unless they have or have gained an ability that states otherwise, and forwards cannot attack on the same turn they're played unless they have or have gained the haste ability. We then move to block declaration. The defending player can choose to block with one of their forwards, but they can only do this with active forwards, and blocking doesn't cause the forward to become dull. Next is damage resolution. If a block is declared, then both the attacking and the blocking forward deal damage to each other at the same time. The amount of damage is the power level of the forward plus any adjustments that have been applied from other abilities or summons during the turn. In this example, Lefty has a power of 5000 but also a field ability that increases the damage that all fire summons and characters deal by 2000. Therefore, she will deal a total of 7,000 to any blocking forward. If a forward receives damage equal to or more than its power, it is broken and is put into the break zone. In this case, both Lefty and Riku would receive 7,000 damage, which would mean they both need to be put to their owner's break zones, like this. The defending player can use the same forward to block multiple attacks, as long as it's still on the field after each of the attacks. If the defending player doesn't block the attack, either because they can't or they don't want to, then instead they receive 1 point of damage, regardless of the power of the forward that was attacking. This means that they must put the top card of their deck into the damage zone face up, like so. They immediately lose the game if they reach 7 points of damage. If the revealed card is marked with an EX burst icon, then the defending player can choose to apply this effect. If they do so, then it's resolved immediately without creating a stack, and therefore there's no opportunity for the attacking player to respond. If the attacking player can and wants to attack with any of the other forwards they have, they start the attack preparation step again and proceed in the same way. When the attacking player has no more forwards that can attack, or they don't want to attack anymore, the phase ends and we move to main phase 2. On each player's turn, the player follows the 7 phases as we just looked at. Players can only play characters to the field on their own turn. On your opponent's turn, you can respond to abilities and effects that create a stack by using your own abilities and summons as we looked at earlier. But you can also respond with abilities and summons when your opponent attempts to move between certain phases of their turn, which are from the main phase 1 to the attack phase, and players will usually describe this as at the end of main phase 1 or before we move to the attack phase, or from the attack phase to the main phase 2, and again this will be described as at the end of the attack phase or before we move to main phase 2, and lastly from the main phase 2 to the end phase, and players will describe this as at the end of main phase 2 or before we move to the end phase. If a player chooses to respond to one of these attempted phase changes, then whatever stack is created is resolved first, and then the phase stays as it is. The player whose turn it is can then proceed in that phase as they normally would, i.e. they're not forced to move the phases just because the opponent responded. You can't respond to any of the other phase changes. Here are some of the other mechanics to be aware of. The limit break is separate to the main deck and contains 8 cards that have the LB symbol in the top right. The rules regarding how this works can be found here. Crystals are an additional resource that can be used to pay for certain abilities. Some cards have abilities that generate crystals, and others have abilities that require spending the crystals. If your deck includes any such cards, you'll need a way of keeping track of your crystals. You could use actual crystal cards, or some kind of marker such as a die. Some characters include warp in their text, which is an alternative way for the character to enter the field from your hand rather than paying the cost as normal. You can pay the warp cost and place a defined number of counters on the card, then at the start of each turn remove a warp counter, and once all the counters have been removed, the character will enter the field. Lastly, there's priming. This is a way for a character to enter the field from your deck rather than from your hand. A character with the priming ability will be able to prime or transform into another named character by searching it from your deck. Again, more detailed rules can be found about how this works at the same website. In summary, the main deck has 50 cards and the limit break has 8 cards. Players take it in turns, and on each turn the phases are activate, draw 2, main phase 1, attack phase, main phase 2 and end phase, except on the first turn when whoever's going first only draws 1 card. You can only play characters on your turn, but on your opponent's turn you can use abilities or summons whenever the opponent triggers an ability, or when they move from the main phase 1 to attack phase, from the attack phase to the main phase 2, or from main phase 2 to the end phase. You can use abilities and summons on your turn as well, whenever you like. The attack phase has a certain sequence of steps, which are preparation, attack, block, damage, and then repeat or go to main phase 2. You win if your opponent receives 7 points of damage, or they're not able to draw or take a damage because their deck is empty. And lastly, all there is to say is good luck and have fun.